We're on the lookout for sponsors to join us on our incredible journey with Inspired Change with Gunter. If your organisation cares deeply about meaningful conversations around masculinity, self-development and mental health, we'd love to partner with you. Our podcast has a wonderful, dedicated audience committed to personal growth and positive social change. By sponsoring Inspired Change with Gunter, your brand will connect with listeners who truly value thoughtful discussion and support initiatives that promote real transformation. We're incredibly proud to be ranked number 1 in Australia and number 5 in the USA on FeedSpot's top men's mental health podcasts. For more information on how to become a sponsor, please reach out to Miranda Spiegner Sapon, our showrunner and executive producer. We'd love to explore how we can work together to inspire change. Now, thank you for your continued support, and let's keep inspiring change together.
You're listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. To guide us through the intricacies and intersections of emotions, relationships, and male identity is renowned psychologist, author, and speaker Gunter Swoboda. This is Inspire Change.
Before I begin the actual podcast, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I work. I would also like to pay my respects to their elders past and present. Welcome everybody to another episode of Inspired Change with Gunter. Welcome everybody to another episode of Inspired Change with Gunter. I'm your host. Just a little bit of housekeeping. As always, my views are just that, my views. And I share them here especially for education and information, not for clinical reasons. If there is an issue that you feel might be best sorted out with a psychologist or a therapist, please go right ahead. So, this week's podcast, I thought we'd dive into something that's pretty important but oft neglected, and that is the mentor wound, where fathers, elders, and the men who should have been here weren't. So, over the last few weeks, we've been doing some reconstruction work. We looked at the civilizational picture, the way an organization organizes itself around wealth and power, not just organizations, but the age in of itself. And then we brought it down to the ground level and looked at work, at the job that quietly becomes a man's whole identity. And I asked, what's left of a man when the job's gone? Now today, I want to go further back than the job. Back before the first promotion, before the first pay, to the place where a boy earns the first lessons about what a man is supposed to be. And I want to talk about something that doesn't get named often enough because naming it touches a nerve. I'm calling it the mentor wound, that gap left by the men who were supposed to show us how and who didn't. The father who's there in body but absent in every other way. The man, the father who left. The grandfather we never knew. The coach, the teacher, the uncle, the older man who could have said, here, this is how you do it. This is how you carry yourself. And instead said nothing, because no one had ever said it to him either. So I want to get it very clear that this is not an episode of blaming fathers. That is very, very important right from the start. This is an episode about a transmission that broke and about what we do now that we can see the break. It's the broken link in the chain. So let me start with a song that a lot of you probably will know, although I suspect it does age me and those of you who know it. It was written by a guy called Harry Chapin, and it's called Cats in the Cradle. A father too busy to be present, planes to catch and bills to pay, and a boy who keeps saying, I'm going to be like you, Dad. And by the end of the song, he's exactly like his father, too busy for his old man. The thing the father never gave, the son never learnt to give. And that's the whole tragedy in a 3-minute song. The legacy passes down intact, and the legacy is absence. I want to slow that down because there's some real deep and meaningful psychological meat in this. This is where we talk about attachment theory, which tells us that our earliest relationships with caregivers become the template for every relationship that follows. When a father is absent physically or emotionally or both, a son can struggle to build secure relationships later. Trust becomes harder. Communication becomes even harder. The blueprint that he was handed has a hole in it, and it's there where connection should be. Now, social learning theory adds the second place. Boys learn how to be men largely by watching. We don't teach masculinity through lectures. We teach it through example, through what the boy sees the man can actually do. And here's the hard part. In what he watches is a man who is silent, who withdraws under pressure, who solves loneliness with work and discomfort with distance. Then that's what gets copied. The unspoken gets transmitted just as faithfully as the spoken, and then often more so. In our book, Making Good Men Great, Lauren and I describe a small scene, a father in a public place trying to manage a small boy who's playing up. The father gets emotionally knocked out by a 4-year-old. He doesn't walk away physically, he withdraws emotionally. And the mother is left to step in. And I made a point at the time, which I'll make again now. If a man can be floored by a 4-year-old, what are his chances with a 14-year-old? When a father absents himself early, even just emotionally, he builds no history of presence to draw on later, at exactly the moments his children need him most and need him to step up. Now that's the mechanism. It's not villainy. A man passing on without meaning to the very thing that was done to him, that's understandable. The masculine interject, that internalized voice of dominant masculinity, which we keep coming back to this season, is largely installed in childhood. And one of its most reliable installers is a father who was taught that presence is optional and feeling is weakness, and who never had the script questioned. So I want to widen this frame because the mentor wound isn't only about individual fathers. It's about something a whole culture stopped doing. For most of human history, the most traditional societies, boys did not simply drift into manhood. They were taken across a line deliberately by older men of the community. There were rites of passage, and these rites generally moved a young man through several realms of being: the physical, then the fullness of reason, then authenticity, And finally, what I'd call being soulful, the place where a man learns to temper himself with wisdom. The crucial thing about these rites is who ran them. And they were run by elders, by men who had already crossed and could therefore guide. The boy and the men initiated him were bound together and bound to the whole community. Manhood was confirmed, witnessed, and held by people who'd been there. Then we settled into agriculture, and then industry and the rite of passage slowly got replaced. Becoming a man stopped being a spiritual and communal threshold and became something far more mechanical. It became about joining the workforce, the military, the trade. And in the world we live in now, that's frayed even further. Boys aren't expected to take their place as men at puberty anymore. Sometimes it's their late 20s before anyone treats them like a fully fledged adult. And nobody marks the moment. There is no line, no elder, no witness. There's just a long, unstructured drift. And a young man trying to assemble a self out of whatever signals he can find. Hence, they become vulnerable to environments like the manosphere. And here, in all of this, is my concern, and it ties straight into what we discussed earlier this season about screens and the manosphere. When a culture removes its elders from the work of making men, it doesn't remove the hunger. The hunger to be shown, to be initiated, to be told, you're a man now, and here's what that means. In that, the hunger doesn't disappear. It goes looking. And there are plenty of people out there, online right now, very happy to play the elder, very happy to initiate young men into a version of masculinity built entirely on the old toxic values, being territorial, hierarchical, being acquisitional, competitive, and ultimately combative. So the mentor wound isn't soft, nor is it a private sadness. It's a structural vulnerability, an ungrieved, unfilled gap that sometimes will fill, but the question is, with what? Now, this is the part of the conversation that a lot of men find the hardest, but it's also the part that matters most. A lot of men carry a quiet story that says, I turned out fine. He did his best. No point dwelling on it. And there's something admirable in that generosity, but there's also something very often a cost hidden underneath. Because you can forgive your father completely and still be carrying a wound, the wound that he left. Forgiveness and grief are not the same thing. You can let a man off the hook morally and still need to mourn what you didn't get from him. In my practice, I see this constantly. Men arrive in what I'd call an existential crisis, often in midlife, often after a divorce or a redundancy or a death. And underneath the presenting problem, there frequently lies an older ache. I never had a man who showed me how. I was making it up from the whole time. I was performing a confidence I never actually felt because no one ever sat with me long enough to build the real thing. And this is an issue right across the board, including in our professional lives, more often than not. Now, that ache deserves ultimately to be named and felt, not bypassed. The reason matters. What we don't grieve, we tend to repeat. And it's one of the reasons why people go around in circles. They make the same mistake again and again and again. The man who never mourns his absent father is the man most likely to become an absent father himself, because the pattern is still running underground, unconsciously, unexamined. Now, grief is what interrupts the transmission. It's how you take the script out of the dark and look at it. And I want to say something gentle but firm here. Grieving the father you didn't have is not self-pity, and it's not disloyalty. It's in fact the opposite. It's the work that lets you stop the wound passing to the next boy. It's how Cats in the Cradle gets a different ending. There's also a reframe in this that I find genuinely hopeful. Many of the men I work with assume that because they didn't receive good fathering, they have nothing to give. Well, the truth is closer to the reverse. The man who has consciously felt the absence of the father often becomes the most deliberate, most present father or mentor, precisely because he knows the cost of the alternative from the inside. The wound faced honestly becomes a qualification. So where does that reconstruction actually happen here? Well, it happens in two directions at once. You look back and you look forward. Looking back is what I've just described, naming the gap, grieving it, and then, where it's possible and safe, do something with the relationship that's still there. For some men, that means a real conversation with an aging father, the one they never managed to have. For others, where the father is gone or where contact isn't healthy, it means finding the eldering they missed elsewhere. And I want to be plain about this. You can be mentored at 50. The hunger to be shown doesn't have an expiry date. Find the older men whose way of being in the world you respect and get close enough to learn from them. That's not weakness. In every society that knew what it was doing, that was simply how men were made. Looking forward is the other half, and it's the one that I really want to leave you with, in essence, because the deepest repair of the mental wound is not only receiving what you missed, it's becoming, for someone younger, the man who was missing for you. You don't need to be anyone's father to do this. You need to be willing to be an elder, to be the uncle who turns up, the coach who actually sees the kid at the back, the older bloke at work who takes the apprentice aside and says, "Here, this is how you carry yourself. And by the way, you don't have to do it the hard way I did." Every one of these moments is a rite of passage rebuilt by hand, one boy at a time. This is the refinement of masculinity I keep talking about. It's not dismantling, it's distillation, the protective instinct, the strength, the wish to provide. None of that gets thrown away. It gets pointed at something worthy. An elder is what a warrior becomes when he grows wise enough to know what's exactly worth defending. And what's worth defending is the next generation's right to be shown the way by men who care enough to show up. So this week, I'd ask you to sit down with two questions. Who were the men who were missing for you? And have you ever let yourself feel that honestly? And then, for whom right now could you be the man who shows up? Because that second question is where the wound stops being a wound and starts becoming a gift. Now, as always, there's a Patreon exercise to go with this one, and it walks you through both of those directions carefully and at your own pace. I'd really encourage you to take your time with it. So this has been Inspired Change with Gunter. If today's episode has resonated, share it with a man who needs it, and most of all, take action. Until next time, stay inspired and challenge the norm. As you can see behind me, we have our new second edition of Making Good Men Great, Surfing a New Masculinity. As I said, it's the second edition. In this instance, my wife has co-authored this with me. And just to give you a bit of background, when I first published Making Good Men Great, I wasn't sure how most guys would receive it. I mean, the title itself puts something on the table. The fact that most of us are actually good, but good actually is not the ceiling. Now, the same dynamic plays out in the workplace. In families, in friendships, patriarchal ideology can colonize almost any human activity if we're not paying attention to it. What Lauren and I are proposing here is not a dismantling of masculinity. It's a refinement of it. It's a deconstruction of patriarchy and a reconstruction of masculinity. You know, on this show, we talk a lot about living with purpose, slowing down, paying attention, and being intentional about the choices we make every day. Because when we simplify the noise around us, we can better hear what really matters. Empathy, connection, and showing up as the best version of ourselves. That's why I'm genuinely pleased to welcome our newest sponsor, Distill Union. Their philosophy aligns beautifully with what we do here. Distill Union creates slick, thoughtfully designed essentials, wallets, key organizers, phone cases, all built with a less is more approach. Their Wally wallets, Ferris key organizers, these are everyday tools that make life easier, cleaner, and calmer. In that simplicity, there's space for clarity. There's space for change. As a thank you to our Inspire Change community, they're offering 20% off any product with the promo code INSPIRECHANGE. Have a look, try them out, and see how simplifying your day can open the door to something deeper. Visit distillunion.com and enjoy 20% off any product with the promo code INSPIRECHANGE. That's distillunion.com with promo code INSPIRECHANGE to check out.
Hello to all our listeners. We thank you for tuning in and supporting positive social change, which makes you a part of Gunter's efforts in transforming not only men's lives, but lives in general. And we are grateful that you have joined us. We want to extend a huge thank you to our listeners in Charlotte for bringing North Carolina to number 10 on the top 10 USA listeners list. And to our global listeners, we extend our gratitude to our listeners in Istanbul for bringing Turkey to number 16 on our global listeners list. Congratulations! You made it to the top listeners list. I, Devonna Prinzi, the co-executive producer, and our showrunner, Miranda Spigner-Sapone, sincerely thank you and ask that you please take the time to like, follow, subscribe, and share as your efforts make a difference to everyone here at Inspire Change with Gunter. If these stories resonate with you and you would like to engage more with Gunter and the Inspire Change team, please consider joining our Patreon community, where our members find bonus content and early access to video episodes. Membership awaits at patreon.com/Inspire Change. That's patreon.com/INSPIRECHANGE. As always, thank you to each and every one of our listeners. And most importantly, please keep inspiring positive social change.
Love to hear from you. And if you're interested, please check out my work on www.gunterswoboda.com or www.goodmengreat.com.
Thank you for listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. For more information on the Making Good Men Great movement, or for individual or group coaching sessions with Gunter, visit goodmengreat.com.